Hey everybody, we are going to do an update here on the medication process in my 125 gallon tank, and I wanted to take some time to talk about doing a little bit of research before we use medications. I saw that I had a little bit of a fungal infection on my angelfish back there. You can see on its left cheek that sort of white fuzzy spot. It is definitely still there, but it looks like it's getting better. So when I saw the fungal infection, I just went ahead and grabbed some of my API fungus cure, and my initial idea was to go ahead and treat the whole tank. If one fish in there has some sort of infection on it, it's a pretty good chance that other fish in the tank might get infected, and so it's best to just treat the whole tank. But first of all, let me address that. In certain circumstances, that may hold true. If it was something that was contagious or a parasite that could spread through the tank, like ick, for example, in that circumstance, that logic would make sense. Go ahead, treat the whole tank. If it's on that fish, then you've got ick in that tank, and that tank needs to be treated for it. In this case, this is a fungal infection on the side of the fish, and fungal infections are not really contagious. A fungal infection is usually a secondary infection where the fish already has some sort of injury. There's a scrape or a scratch, or there's some issue with the slime coat not being fully intact in an area, and that is what will lead to a fungal infection. So chances are that angelfish simply had a scratch or a scrape on its body. Somebody suggested it could have got too close to the heater and got a little burn on its cheek. That's possible, I suppose. But whatever the case, it's probably based on an injury to that fish alone and not to any kind of threat to anybody else in the tank. And so treating the entire tank for that fungal infection is probably unnecessary. Furthermore, I did not really look into what the API fungus cure contained. I knew it was going to turn my water green because I've used it in the past, and I never really honestly thought about what was making the water green. The package just says this may cause some staining in your water. It'll go away over time. Don't worry about it. But when I looked it up, I found out that, not surprisingly, it is malachite green that is in this API fungus cure. Now, API fungus cure no longer exists. They've discontinued the product, and that's why I was actually looking up what the ingredients were. I was trying to find a replacement for it, and I was looking for something that contained similar ingredients. And so I began looking up what was the ingredients on the API fungus cure, and I found out that it's malachite green and some other antifungal agent. I don't know what the other antifungal agent is, but I do know what malachite green is, and malachite green is pretty harsh. It's a pretty harsh chemical to put in your tank. It's much, much harsher than the methylene blue, which is used for a lot of the same conditions. But the methylene blue is much, much gentler on your fish and much, much gentler on your aquarium as a whole. So I put the malachite green in here, not really knowing I was doing that. And malachite green can kill plants, and it can kill inverts. And I've got a lot of snails in this tank. You can see I've got some of the nearite snails you can see on the glass. I've got this rabbit snail down here. I've got a black spike snail in here. I've got a bunch of pond snails and miscellaneous snails that aren't really pet snails, but are in there nonetheless, and I treat them as though they're part of the cleanup crew. And I really don't want to wipe out my entire snail population. I have quite a few of the nearites in this tank. And so it's been almost 48 hours. We've done our initial dose, but instead of doing a second dose, because I do have one more package, I could do another round of treatment on this tank. I don't want to put malachite green in this tank anymore. And so what I'm going to use on the second dose, and yes, I am going to treat the whole tank. And the reason I'm going to treat the whole tank is, well, two reasons really. One is that is a large angelfish, and the only tanks I have that I could use as a hospital tank would be a 10-gallon tank, and that angelfish simply will not fit in a 10-gallon tank. I could go out to the Walmart and I could buy a big tub or something to put together, and again, I'm just not worried about it. I'm just going to go ahead and treat the whole tank. It's not that big a deal. The other reason I'm going to treat the whole tank is because what I'm treating the tank with now is going to be this fin and body cure, and this is just doxycycline. This is just an antibiotic. And my Tanapoma, who you've seen drifting in and out of the scene as we've been videoing here, my Tanapoma is experiencing bloat right now. It's not really bad, but it's there, and it's not getting any better, and it's not going away. And I'm hoping by dosing him with doxycycline, we just saw him in the back there for a minute, but he drifted away again. So I'm hoping that dosing him with the doxycycline will treat his bloat. I've never had a fish that got bloated ever get unbloated. I've never had a fish recover from being bloated, but this is also a little bit different. I've never had a fish get slightly bloated and then just stay slightly bloated. Every time I've ever had a fish experience bloat, it's always just gotten worse and worse and worse until the fish practically pops, you know, and then it dies. And in this case, again, my Tanapoma is just bloated, but it doesn't seem like it's getting any worse. It's just to the point where his fins are starting to look a little bit pine-coney. And so I'm going to treat the tank with doxycycline. Hopefully that will clear up the patch on the side of the angelfish's face. Let's see if we can get a better look at it now. So you can see how fuzzy that looks. But the fuzz also looks like it's starting to break up and come off of his face. So maybe the 2 days worth of treatment is actually having some sort of impact. I don't know. But either way, I'm going to treat that fish with the doxycycline, and somewhere in there is my Tanapoma, and that is also going to get treated with the doxycycline. I do have one red tiger lotus flower in bloom, but because the water's down, it's kinda, you can't really see it, but that white thing right there is actually the tiger lotus flower. And once I get the tank filled back up, it'll be back floating on the surface again. So there you go. I'm not going to do a before and after. I just wanted to talk about the medications, and just word to the wise, learn from my mistakes, and you know, research your medications before you use them. Look at what the ingredients are. Make sure it's compatible with all the fish, all the plants. Sometimes whether you've got a high pH or a low pH, that may affect the way the medication may work. If you're using water conditioners in your tank, that may affect the way your medications work. So if you are going to medicate a tank, and if you live in an area where you can readily get medications, I know a lot of people can't even get fish medications, but if you do live in an area where you can just order fish meds online, don't take that real casually. It's not something you can just throw in the tank, and it's probably not going to be any big deal. You know, even if I use the wrong meds, what can go wrong? Well, a lot can go wrong if you use the wrong meds, and I'm learning that, hopefully not the hard way. Hopefully nothing bad is going to have come of this. But I did put malachite green in a tank full of inverts. I've got a bunch of snails in this tank, and I really should not have put the malachite green in this tank, and yet here we are looking at a green fish tank. So again, if you can learn from my mistakes, I'm happy to share my mistakes with people if it saves somebody else from making the same mistake in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and get on with this. We're just going to go ahead and do a big old water change today, probably a solid 50%, maybe even more. I want to get a lot of that malachite green out of the tank. Once we get the tank back up and running, I am then going to begin dosing the tank with the doxycycline. And on a final note, I will say that I don't believe the doxycycline will have any impact on my cycle, but I will be very wary of what's going on with my nitrogen cycle once I start putting an antibiotic in the tank. I don't know if it's gram negative or gram positive, or if it's, you know, I don't know enough about antibiotics to know exactly what it's going to do to my nitrogen cycle. But I know my nitrogen cycle is comprised of bacteria, and I know antibiotics kill certain types of bacteria, so I'm just going to be aware that my nitrogen cycle may get disrupted during this process, and so I'm going to be wary of that. So again, learn from my lessons. Do your research before you go dumping meds in your tank. So make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss anything I got coming up. You want to see how this turns out, make sure everybody's okay, etc., etc. Don't forget I do a live stream every Friday night and Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching this one. I look forward to seeing you on the next one.